In part 2 of the chapter 17 flipped classroom, we're going to start by looking at the Turks. And these Turks, remember, they're very similar to the Mongols, so we're going to they have like a similar political organization. And remember that the thing that allows them to really start being more of a force is forming into confederations. So at the top you would have the Great Khan, and then the Great Khan would gain loyalty from different groups, different Turkish groups, each of whom would have their own like leader or Khan, right? That's why the person at the top is like Genghis Khan, like the Great Khan. And then all of those people within those different confederations would then be loyal to the Great Khan and they would fight for that Khan. Okay, so the Khan, that confederation is very important. It kind of looks just like this diagram here, although this is not meant to be a confederation. So we're going to start by looking at the Seljuks. We already learned a little bit about them in chapter 14 when we learned about Islam. So remember that we're going to talk a little bit about how these guys were such a huge military threat, but it has to do with their equestrian skills and archery. So the Seljuk Turks were actually originally drawn to the Abbasid Empire because they wanted to participate in trade. But in 1055, the Abbasid Caliph accepted the Seljuk Turkish leader after a bunch of wars. Turgul Beg was his name, as sultan or chieftain. And you'll remember what that means. That's different than a caliph because they don't have any religious authority. The Seljuk Turks continued to expand and eventually reduced the Byzantine Empire by taking over Manzikert, which was kind of, well, it was really, Anatolia was like the breadbasket of the Byzantine. So that was really drastically, well, it was very hard for the Byzantine Empire to recover from. They never did. After this, they're conquered by the Ottomans. And also, this was where the Silk Road, this region was where the Silk Road terminated. So that also hurt the Byzantines' control of trade. So it was really bad for them in two ways. One, with food production, two, with controlling trade in the Mediterranean, or the use of goods in the Mediterranean. So then on the other side of things, in India, so think of this as these two are not, not the same, right? This is not actually a confederation. You have the Ghaznavid Turks. Now, the Ghaznavid Turks were started by this dude, Mahmud Ghazni. And Ghazni is kind of like right here and in Afghanistan. And what this guy would do is he would plunder Hindu and Buddhist temples because they had a lot of rich stuff in them. And then he'd bring the wealth back to Afghanistan, which means land of the Afghans. That's kind of this Turkish thing. A stand is like land of, place of. His main goal was really to plunder, like I said, but later on his descendants established a more permanent rule with the Delhi Sultanate, which is how Islam really gets integrated into India's fabric. If all this sounds familiar to you, good job. You were listening to the chapter 13, 15, and 18 flipped classroom because we referred to this guy in those videos. So here we have the extent of the Seljuk Empire. So you can see the Byzantine Empire, the Abbasids were really taken aback by them, and 1071 is where that's Manzikert there, and 1055. And then over here you've got what eventually becomes the Delhi Sultanate. You can tell that Mahmud Ghazni is really focused on northern India. And then again, that yellow dot's close to Ghazni, where he's from. Okay, so So, again, how do these groups expand? They expand by banding together in confederations. And confederations have a leader, the Khan, who rules indirectly over other groups. So those groups had their own leaders who pledges loyalty to this Khan. And the Mongols do this in this really amazing way where they gather all of the different groups together and they vote on who's going to be the Khan. It's really cool. And the thing about them is that they're super duper good at military stuff, and you can see what makes them so good at it here. I've got two examples. You've got your horses with your equestrian skills. Kids start riding before, really, well, not before they can walk, but they're on horses basically before they can walk. They're riding very, very early on. And the Mongol warriors would, at first were archers, and they were trained to wait until all four hooves of the horse were off the ground in a gallop, and then they would shoot, so they had pinpoint accuracy. This is the Mongol warrior up top and the Turkish warrior down below. One of the things that made them so amazing at military skills, like first of all, they were incredibly skilled horsemen, and they took their horses with them everywhere. Genghis Khan never had a fighting force that was over 125,000, and he was able to create the largest empire in the world. The other thing is that they were very adaptable, and they took on different tactics very easily. This is a drawing from the siege at Baghdad in 1258, not done by Genghis Khan, but done by one of his descendants. And in this battle, they killed between 200 and 300,000 people. And Baghdad is an example of a city that after this siege, like never recovered. So it's a city that declined during this time period. It rose and then it declined. So we're always looking for those examples of cities that rise, those examples of cities that fall. Baghdad is an example of a city that declined after this. So they used trebuchets. Like after they arrived at these cities and these people would hole up behind these walls, they couldn't really fight them on the open field with horses. So they would use trebuchets, and they would fling all kinds of stuff at people, things that were flaming. Some even rumored like plague people who had died from the plague. They've got these metal balls that they're throwing in this trebuchet. And that's not from Baghdad, but it's from another Arab city. And then they also adapted to use gunpowder and had cannons. So they weren't using like fire sticks or guns, but they were using cannons. So this is another great example of their adaptability. If it was good, they did not turn their nose up at it. Here you can see the trebuchets and the horses. And trebuchet down here with the what are basically cannonballs over here that are being loaded in, and you can't see it off to the side, but it's got the little holder. And then this is another picture of, or side-by-side image of the siege of Baghdad. And I think I wanted to draw your attention to this here because you have these Mongols. One of the things with war is that they'd like create this atmosphere of war. So they would let out like blood-curdling, super scary yells all at the same time. And then they would also have like drummers who would provide this steady drumming to just freak people out. So it was all about also the atmosphere of war. So now that we know a little bit more about the style of warfare, we're going to move on to the Mongol empires themselves, Genghis Khan and his descendants, and look at how what they created in the next part of the flipped classroom.